I stood in the living room of my childhood home, watching my mother's face turn white as I slid the thick folder across the coffee table. Inside were bank statements, mortgage documents, and legal papers that would change everything. My father sat frozen on the worn couch, his usual commanding presence suddenly deflated. This wasn't a reunion. This was a reckoning. "I'm not here to give you money," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm here to tell you that I bought your debt from the bank. This house, it's mine now. You have 7 days to move out." My mother's scream echoed through the house, but I didn't flinch, not anymore. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt taken for granted by the people who were supposed to love you most, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself, and drop a comment sharing your own experience with toxic family dynamics. Your story matters, and you're not alone. Now let me take you back to where this all started. Let me tell you how I became the villain in my own family's story simply by refusing to be their ATM anymore. It was Thanksgiving 3 months ago. I had driven 4 hours from my apartment in the city, my trunk loaded with gifts I couldn't really afford, but bought anyway because that's what good daughters do, right? I had just gotten promoted to senior financial analyst at my firm, a position I'd worked 70-hour weeks to earn. I was excited to share the news, maybe even get a congratulations for once, instead of the usual criticism about my choice to focus on my career, instead of getting married and giving them grandchildren. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew something was wrong. The house was eerily quiet despite being full of relatives. Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob stood in the hallway, whispering their voices, cutting off abruptly when they saw me. Cousin Jennifer gave me a pitying look. In the living room, my mother sat on the couch with red-rimmed eyes, dabbing at her face with a tissue in that performative way she had perfected over the years. My father stood by the window, his jaw clenched, radiating anger like heat from a furnace. And there was Kevin, my 25-year-old brother, sprawled on the recliner with a bag of ice pressed to his head, looking like he'd lost a bar fight. He smirked when he saw me, that same entitled grin he'd worn since childhood, the one that said he knew he could get away with anything. "Sarah." My mother's voice trembled with manufactured emotion. "Thank God you're here. We have a situation." I set down the bags of gifts and the expensive wine I'd brought. "What happened? Is everyone okay?" My father turned from the window, his face hardening. "Your brother had an accident. Are you hurt?" I moved toward Kevin instinctively, years of being the responsible older sister kicking in. "The car's totaled," Kevin said, his words slightly slurred. The smell of alcohol hit me from 5 feet away. Ice flooded my veins. "What car?" "Your car," my mother said, and suddenly I understood the looks, the whispers, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "My car." My voice came out higher than I intended. "Kevin, you don't have a license. You lost it 6 months ago for drunk driving." "He just needed to borrow it." My mother jumped in quickly. "He had an important job interview." At 11 o'clock at night, I looked at Kevin, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "On Thanksgiving." "Don't be dramatic, Sarah." My father cut in his voice, taking on that authoritative tone he used when he wanted to shut down any argument. "Accidents happen. That's what insurance is for." "Insurance that I pay for. On a car that I make payments on. That he stole the keys to because I specifically told him no last week when he asked to borrow it." My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my sides. My mother stood up, her tears miraculously drying. "How dare you use that word about your own brother? He didn't steal anything. This is a family, and family helps each other. That's what you don't seem to understand, Sarah. You've become so selfish since you moved to the city with your fancy job and your expensive apartment." Selfish. I felt something crack inside my chest like ice breaking. "I'm selfish. I'm the one who co-signed your mortgage when the bank wouldn't approve you because of your credit score. I'm the one who pays Kevin's phone bill, his car insurance, even though he doesn't have a car anymore apparently. I'm the one who sent you $5,000 last year when Dad's business had that cash flow problem. We raised you," my father said coldly. "We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. You don't get to throw that in our faces now. What you give to this family is the bare minimum of what you owe us." The room went silent. I could feel everyone watching, waiting to see what I would do. waiting for me to apologise to back down to write a cheque like I always did. And another thing, my mother continued, sensing my hesitation as weakness. Why didn't you get the premium insurance package on that car? If you had, this wouldn't even be an issue. But no, you had to cheap out, and now look at the mess you've caused. Something inside me snapped. Not like a twig, but like a dam breaking years of resentment and hurt and swallowed anger flooding out all at once. The mess I caused. My voice was quiet, deadly calm. I caused this mess by not psychically predicting that my unemployed brother would steal my keys, drive drunk and total my car. Don't you dare speak to your mother like that. My father stepped toward me, his finger pointed at my face like a weapon. I bought that car myself. I make the payments myself. I pay the insurance myself, with money I earned. At a job I got through my own hard work, not through handouts or bailouts or someone else cleaning up my messes. Kevin laughed, actually laughed. Oh, here we go. St. Sarah so much better than the rest of us. You think you're hot stuff because you wear a pantsuit to work. At least I work, I shot back. That's when my mother slapped me, hard, across the face, in front of my aunt, uncle, cousins, and everyone gathered for Thanksgiving dinner. The sound echoed in the sudden silence, my cheek burned. Aunt Linda gasped. But I didn't cry. I didn't cower. I looked my mother straight in the eye, and I saw something I'd never allowed myself to see before she hated me. Not because of anything I'd done, but because I had escaped. Because I had built a life that didn't revolve around their needs and their drama and their constant financial crises that somehow always became my responsibility to fix. That's it, my father said, his voice low and threatening. I want you out of this house. You're an ungrateful, selfish bitch who only cares about money. Get out. Get out now, and don't you ever come back to this family. Kevin stood up, swaying slightly, and picked up my purse from the side table. He walked to the front door, opened it, and threw my bag out into the snowy front yard. Then he threw out the bags of gifts, one by one, watching them land in the slush with that same smirk on his face. There's your presents, sis. Hope they were expensive. I could have screamed. I could have cried. I could have begged them to understand, to see reason, to appreciate everything I'd sacrificed for them. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened my wireless carrier app, and cancelled the family plan right there in the living room. 5 lines disconnected instantly. My parents' phones, Kevin's phone, even Grandma's phone, the one I'd added last year so she could video chat with us. What are you doing? My mother shrieked. Removing the ungrateful, selfish bitch from your family plan, I said. Since I only care about money, I'm sure you'll understand why I can't afford to pay for people who don't want me in their lives. I walked out into the snow in my heels and dress collected. My scattered belongings got into my rental car because, yes, I'd rented a car to come here since Kevin had already asked to borrow mine and I'd said no, and I drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see my mother standing in the doorway screaming something I couldn't hear anymore. The first week after Thanksgiving was a blur. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, volunteering for weekend projects, anything to avoid thinking about the hole where my family used to be. My co-workers noticed I wasn't taking personal calls anymore, but they were kind enough not to ask questions. I blocked my parents' numbers, Kevin's number, even distant relatives who I knew would be recruited as flying monkeys to guilt-trip me into reconciling. I cried exactly once on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, sitting in my apartment with a bottle of wine, and the realization that I had nowhere to go for Christmas. No family dinners to attend, no traditions to uphold, no one to buy gifts for. It felt like freedom and grief all tangled together, impossible to separate. Then 1 month to the day after I was kicked out, I received a letter from my bank. The envelope was thick, official looking, the kind that makes your heart sink before you even open it. Inside was a credit report with numbers that made me physically ill. My credit score had dropped from a respectable 750 to 520. In 1 month. That wasn't just bad, that was catastrophic. That was career-ending in my industry where background checks and financial responsibility were part of the job requirements. My hands shook as I scanned the report. 3 credit cards I'd never opened, all maxed out. Total debt of $47,000 spread across high-interest cards from stores I'd never shopped at. Designer clothing stores, electronics retailers, online gambling sites. The applications had been submitted 6 months ago, approved 4 months ago, and the spending spree had started the moment each card was activated, long before Thanksgiving. long before the fight. This had been planned, systematic, calculated. I called the credit card companies one by one. Each time they read back my social security number, my mother's maiden name, which she obviously knew my date of birth, my address. All my information submitted perfectly approved without question, because my credit had been excellent. Had been. The customer service representative from the last card company, a woman named Patricia, who sounded genuinely sympathetic, told me something that made my blood run cold. "Mum, I'm looking at the account history. The primary user added an authorised user 1 week after opening the account. The authorised user's name is Kevin Montgomery, your brother." "Yes," I whispered. "I'm so sorry. This happens more often than you'd think. Family members, usually parents, sometimes siblings, taking out credit in someone else's name. We can flag this as potential identity theft, but you'll need to file a police report to dispute the charges. Otherwise, legally, you're responsible for the debt." After I hung up, I sat in the dark of my apartment for a long time. I thought about calling my mother, confronting her, asking her how she could do this to me. But I already knew what she'd say. She'd cry. She'd say I was being dramatic. She'd say family helps family, and I had money, didn't I? I could afford it. She'd raised me after all. This was just paying her back. Instead, I called a lawyer. James Chen was a friend from college who specialised in family law and financial fraud. When I finished explaining the situation, there was a long pause on his end. "Sarah, you know what you have to do, right? File a police report for identity theft. Against your own mother." "Yes." "This will destroy your relationship with your family, probably permanently." "James," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "They already destroyed it when they decided I was more valuable as a credit score than as a daughter." We met the next day at his office downtown. James had already pulled together a preliminary case file. The identity theft was clear-cut prosecutable under federal law. But there was something else in the folder, something I hadn't known about. "Sarah, when did you co-sign on your parents' mortgage?" 4 years ago, when they were trying to refinance. Their credit was too low to qualify for a decent rate. Why? "Did you read the entire contract?" I skimmed it. They said they needed my signature that day or they'd lose the house. Why?" James turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was a clause I'd never noticed buried in page 17 of the mortgage agreement. If the primary borrowers defaulted or failed to make payments for 3 consecutive months, the co-signer had the legal right to assume control of the property to prevent foreclosure. "Are they behind on payments?" "According to public records, they're 4 months behind. The bank sent them a notice of default last week. They have 60 days before foreclosure proceedings begin." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. "Can I buy the debt from the bank?" "Absolutely. You're already legally attached to the loan as a co-signer. Your credit is taking a hit from their missed payments. The bank would be thrilled to offload a bad loan to someone who's actually willing and able to pay. You'd own the house, Sarah, outright. Or more accurately, you'd own the debt and your parents would owe you." "How much would it cost?" "They owe about $240,000 on the mortgage. But the house is only worth about $200,000 in the current market. They're underwater. The bank would probably let you assume the debt for around $160,000 just to get it off their books. You'd still have to pay the remaining balance over time, but you'd control the asset. And my parents would become tenants in a house you own, or more accurately, borrowers who owe you money. If they can't pay, you can evict them, legally, cleanly." I looked at James, this kind man who'd been my study partner in college, who'd helped me through brutal finance exams, who knew me as someone who always played by the rules and tried to do the right thing. "Do it," I said. "Set up the transfer and prepare the identity theft case. I want everything ready to go." "Are you sure?" "They kicked me out on Thanksgiving for not having premium insurance on a car my brother totaled while driving drunk. They stole my identity to fund his shopping addiction and gambling debts. They made me feel like a terrible person for having boundaries. I'm done asking permission to protect myself." 2 weeks later, everything was in motion. James filed the police report for identity theft, with my mother's name prominently featured. The credit card companies flagged the accounts as fraudulent, which meant the debt would be removed from my credit report, but it also meant there would be a criminal investigation. I bought the mortgage debt from the bank for $158,000. It wiped out most of my savings, but I'd been putting away money aggressively since college, knowing my parents would always need financial help. Turned out I'd been saving for the right reason, just not the reason I'd thought. The bank was thrilled. They sent me a fruit basket and a thank you card. The house was mine, or rather the debt was mine, which meant my parents were now borrowing from me instead of from a faceless institution. And I didn't tell them any of this, not yet. During those 2 weeks, my phone rang constantly from numbers I didn't recognise. My parents calling from friends' phones, from public phones, from burner phones they must have purchased. I blocked every single one. They tried to reach me through email. I set up filters that sent their messages straight to trash. My aunt showed up at my office building, but security turned her away when I told them I didn't know anyone by that name. Then came the day Kevin showed up at my workplace. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was in a meeting with a potential client when security called my desk phone. I excused myself and took the call in the hallway. "Miss Montgomery, there's a young man in the lobby causing a disturbance. Says he's your brother. Should we call the police?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Tell him I don't have a brother. If he doesn't leave immediately, press charges for trespassing." But Kevin wasn't smart enough to leave. By the time I got back to my meeting, I could hear shouting from the lobby, 16 floors below. My client raised an eyebrow. "Family issue. Former family issue," I corrected. "Please excuse me for just a moment." I took the elevator down and watched through the security office monitor as Kevin screamed at the guards at the reception desk at anyone who would listen. He was calling me horrible names, telling everyone that I'd abandoned my sick parents, that I was a heartless career woman who only cared about money, that I'd turned my back on the family that raised me. The police arrived within minutes. I watched as they handcuffed my baby brother, the kid I used to read bedtime stories to, and led him away for disturbing the peace and criminal trespass. I went back upstairs and closed the deal with my client. Turns out displaying grace under pressure is attractive to people looking to invest their money. That night, my mother went on Facebook and posted a live video. I wouldn't have known about it if my few remaining friends from high school hadn't sent me screenshots. In the video, she was crying, makeup running down her face in calculated streaks, sitting in their messy living room, with my father standing behind her, looking stern and disappointed. "My daughter has abandoned us," she sobbed to the camera. "We're about to lose our home. Sarah Montgomery, if you're watching this, please, your father and I are begging you. We made mistakes, but we're your parents. You can't just throw us away because of one little argument. We need you. Please come home. Please help us." The comments were predictably split. Half the people were calling me a monster. The other half were asking pointed questions like why adult parents couldn't pay their own bills and why a grown man was calling his sister at work. But the damage was spreading. People from my past, people I hadn't thought about in years, were sending me messages about what a terrible person I was. I called James. "Can we accelerate the timeline?" "For what?" "All of it. I want to end this now." 3 days later, I sent my parents a text from a new number they wouldn't have blocked yet. The message was simple. "I'm willing to discuss the mortgage situation. Meet me at the house tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone." They responded within seconds. Grateful, relieved already, counting the money they thought I was about to hand over. I arrived at the house at 1:50, driving a car they wouldn't recognise, wearing my best suit. James arrived separately and waited in his car down the street. In my briefcase was a folder containing documents that would change everything, and in my pocket was a small audio recorder because in our state one-party consent recording was legal. My parents were already there, sitting in the living room, looking shabby and desperate in a way I'd never seen before. The house was messier than usual, newspapers and bills piled on the coffee table, dishes in the sink visible from the living room. My father had lost weight. My mother's roots were showing grey in her normally dyed hair. When I walked in without knocking using the key I'd never returned, they both jumped up. "Sarah." My mother rushed toward me, arms outstretched for a hug I didn't return. She stopped short, her arms dropping. "Thank God you came. We knew you wouldn't really abandon us. You're a good girl." "Sit down," I said calmly, "both of you." Something in my tone made them obey. I sat across from them in the chair that used to be my grandmother's, set my briefcase on the coffee table and pulled out the folder. "You said you wanted to discuss the mortgage situation." My father started, his voice taking on that authoritative tone again. "We're 4 months behind on payments and the bank is threatening foreclosure. We need you to give us money to catch up. About 15,000 should do it. Then we can talk about you moving back home and contributing to the household expenses like a good daughter should." I opened the folder slowly, deliberately. You're not 4 months behind, you're 5 months behind as of yesterday. The total you owe is now approaching $18,000 in back payments plus penalties and fees. Well, then we need $18,000, my mother said, an edge of hysteria in her voice. Sarah, please, we're desperate. Where else can we go? That's the interesting question, isn't it? I pulled out the first document. Where can you go when you've burned every bridge, maxed out every credit card, and alienated everyone who's ever tried to help you? What are you talking about? My father's face was reddening. I'm talking about these. I laid out the credit card statements one by one like dealing cards. Capital One opened 6 months ago in my name, my social security number without my knowledge or consent, maxed out at $15,000. Chase Sapphire, same story, $19,000. Discover Card, $13,000. All opened by you, Mum, using my personal information. All cards given to Kevin to spend however he wanted. The colour drained from my mother's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I pulled out the police report. I've already filed charges for identity theft. The FBI handles these cases when they cross state lines, which yours did, because Kevin used one of the cards in Atlantic City. Did you know that he took a weekend gambling trip on my stolen credit? You filed charges, my father's voice was barely a whisper, against your own mother. I filed charges against a criminal who stole my identity and ruined my credit to fund my brother's lifestyle. The fact that she happens to be the woman who gave birth to me is irrelevant to the law. My mother started crying, real tears this time, not the performative kind. We were desperate, we needed money, you have so much, and you wouldn't help us unless we begged. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. I felt the anger rising but kept my voice level. What wasn't fair was you deciding that my credit, my reputation, my financial future was yours to destroy because you couldn't balance a checkbook. What wasn't fair was you treating me like an ATM machine instead of a person. What wasn't fair was you kicking me out of this house for having boundaries. We didn't mean it, my father said quickly. We were angry. You can come back. We'll apologise. Just please don't press charges against your mother. It will destroy this family. This family was already destroyed. You just didn't realise it because I kept pretending everything was fine while I slowly drowned paying for all of you. I pulled out the next set of documents. Now let's talk about this house. What about the house? My mother asked warily. Did you really think I wouldn't find out you hadn't made a payment in 5 months? We were going to catch up, my father said defensively. We just needed time. Time you didn't have. The bank sent you a notice of default. You had 60 days to cure the default before foreclosure proceedings began. That deadline passed 3 days ago. We know, my mother wailed. That's why we need your help. Sarah, please, we'll lose everything. You've already lost everything. I laid out the final document, the deed transfer papers. 3 weeks ago, I bought your mortgage debt from the bank. This house now belongs to me. Technically, I own the loan, and you owe me $240,000 that you clearly can't pay. Silence. Complete, total silence. My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish. My mother turned white, then red, then white again. You did what? My father finally managed. I exercised my right as a co-signer to assume the debt and prevent foreclosure. The bank was happy to get a bad loan off their books. I paid them $158,000 for the privilege of becoming your landlord. That's not possible, my mother whispered. You can't do that. I already did. I have the papers right here. Signed, notarized, filed with the county recorder's office. This house is mine. This is our home, my father exploded, jumping to his feet. We've lived here for 20 years. You can't just take it. I didn't take anything. You gave it to me when you stopped making payments. When you put my name on the loan, you gave me legal rights. You clearly never bothered to understand. I stood up as well, matching his height in my heels. Here's what's going to happen. You have 7 days to move out of this house. I'm selling it to cover the debt you've accumulated. Any remaining money after the sale and after I recoup my losses will be divided according to the courts. You can't do this, my mother was screaming now, standing up, her hands balled into fists. We're your parents, you owe us, we gave you life. And I gave you 18 years of financial support, bailed you out of every crisis, sacrificed my own wants and needs to keep this family afloat. We're even, more than even, I'm done. My mother lunged at me, then actually lunged, hands reaching for my throat or my face. I wasn't sure which. But I was ready. I stepped back smoothly and pressed the button on my watch, the one James had told me to wear, the one that sent an immediate alert. The front door opened, and two things happened at once. James walked in, his law firm's video camera capturing everything, and a uniformed police officer stepped into the doorway behind him. "Mrs. Montgomery," the officer said calmly, "I'm going to need you to step back and calm down." My mother froze, her hands still raised. She looked at me, at James, at the cop, and something broke in her expression. "You planned this. You wanted to humiliate us." "I planned to protect myself legally. You chose to make it dramatic." I nodded to James, who stepped forward with another folder. "Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery," James said in his professional attorney voice, "I'm James Chen, representing your daughter. We have documented evidence of identity theft, credit card fraud, and financial elder abuse, if we count the grandmother's phone line that was cancelled, though she's chosen not to press charges on that count. The district attorney is very interested in this case. Multiple counts of federal identity theft carry sentences of up to 15 years in prison." "Prison," my father's voice cracked. "However," James continued smoothly, "my client is willing to offer you an alternative. In exchange for you signing over any and all claims to this property, accepting the eviction notice, and agreeing to never contact Sarah again, she will agree to a plea deal that keeps Mrs. Montgomery out of federal prison. You'll still face charges, but with Sarah's cooperation, we can argue for restitution and probation instead of jail time." "You want us to disappear from your life?" my mother said flatly. All the crying stopped her voice hollow. "You want to erase us? I want you to face consequences for your actions without destroying your lives completely. More mercy than you showed me." I picked up a pen from my briefcase and set it on the table next to the documents. "Sign the papers. Move out peacefully. Start over somewhere else. Maybe with enough time and therapy become the kind of people who can have relationships that aren't based on exploitation." My father looked at the papers, at his wife, at me. "If we don't sign, then Mrs. Montgomery goes to trial for federal identity theft. We let the foreclosure proceed, which will destroy any remaining credit you have, and I make sure every person who watched Mum's Facebook video knows exactly what kind of people you are. I have documentation for everything. Bank statements, recorded phone calls, screenshots. I'll bury you." "You've become a monster," my mother whispered. "No," I said quietly. "I've become someone who refuses to set herself on fire to keep other people warm. There's a difference." They signed the papers, both of them with shaking hands, while the police officer and James witnessed. I recorded the whole thing on my phone for good measure. When it was done, I handed them the eviction notice, with the 7-day deadline clearly marked. "One more thing," I said as I prepared to leave. "Kevin is in county jail on criminal trespass charges from showing up at my office. I'm not paying his bail. If you want him out, you'll have to find the money yourselves. And when he gets out, you might want to remind him that using someone else's credit card is also a crime, and I have all the receipts." I walked out of the house I grew up in for the last time, James beside me, leaving my parents standing in the ruins of their own making. 1 week later, I watched from my car as a moving company threw trash bags full of their belongings onto the curb. My parents had waited until the last possible day to move, probably hoping I'd change my mind. I hadn't. The house sold 3 days later to a young couple with a baby on the way. I cleared enough from the sale to recoup my investment and paid off a chunk of my student loans with what remained. My mother took a plea deal: 6 months of house arrest, 5 years probation, and mandatory financial counselling. My father got a job at a hardware store, his pride finally broken enough to accept hourly work. They moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a low-income complex across town. I heard through the grapevine that they fought constantly, each blaming the other for losing everything. Kevin did 60 days in county jail for the trespassing charge and came out to discover he had a criminal record that made employment nearly impossible. Last I heard, he was working fast food part-time and living on someone's couch. As for me, I moved into a beautiful penthouse apartment downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. My credit score recovered within 6 months once the fraudulent cards were removed from my report. I got another promotion at work. I started dating James, actually, which was unexpected, but nice. Someone who understood what I'd been through, who didn't judge me for protecting myself. 3 months after everything concluded, I was sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine watching the sunset when my phone rang. unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. It was my mother calling from someone else's phone. Her voice was small, defeated. "Sarah, please don't hang up. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. You were right. We used you. We treated you like you only existed to solve our problems. I understand if you never forgive me, but I needed you to know that I finally see it. What we did to you. How wrong it was." I listened to her words, searching for the manipulation I'd been trained to expect, the hook that would reel me back in. But all I heard was exhaustion and genuine regret. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "I hope you mean it. I hope you get the help you need. But I'm not ready to have you in my life again. Maybe someday, not now." "I understand," she paused. "You've done really well for yourself. I'm proud of you. I should have said that more. Goodbye, Mum." I hung up and immediately blocked the number. Then I sat there looking at my phone, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: peace. Some people would say I went too far. That family is family, that I should have found another way, that taking someone's home is cruel no matter what they did. But those people have never been drained dry by someone who's supposed to love them. They've never had their identity stolen by their own mother. They've never been punched for having boundaries. I didn't destroy my family. I simply stopped letting them destroy me. There's a difference, and I'm finally learning to live in that difference. James is inside making dinner. I can smell garlic and herbs wafting through the open balcony door. My phone stays silent. No emergency calls, no guilt trips, no one expecting me to save them from themselves. My bank account is mine. My credit is mine. My life is mine. And I've never been freer. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you are the ones who hurt you most. Sometimes the price of peace is everything you thought you couldn't live without. But I'm here to tell you that on the other side of that loss is something beautiful: yourself whole and uncompromised, finally free to build a life that's actually yours. Was I too harsh, or is this exactly what needed to happen? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you've ever had to cut off toxic family, tell me your story. And if this video helped you feel less alone, hit that subscribe button, because I share these kinds of stories to remind us all that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Thank you for listening, and remember, you don't owe anyone your destruction, not even family.